Welcome to Around the Table.
Hello. Good. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Phyllis?
I'm Phyllis,
All
yes.
right.
Today we're with Cory Booker in his Newark, New Jersey neighborhood at Vonda's Kitchen, a favorite restaurant of the vegan senator.
People really are afraid of losing their rights.
ABC News has carefully chosen 3 undecided voters to bring their questions to the table tonight as they decide who will get their vote in the Democratic presidential primary.
At this point, I have no idea who to believe.
You guys should not be shy. And I know this is heavy on the vegetables, but I'm gonna just keep.
For good reason.
Yes. You know, you guys help yourself. I'm the host, so you guys serve first, please. So you're saying you are from Philly, and when I say Philly, you're from Philly. You're
Like
in
I'm from North Philly.
Yes. Do you rent in the Ironbound?
I do, and I
Talk
would
about
just
expensive.
well, that's that idea of affordable housing that you talk about. To be quite frank, I just see it go right over my head. How do we define the affordable housing? And the reality is that in my opinion, when we see those developments, the nature of the development is not to help anyone that is a Newark resident. So you're developing a luxury building. Now, one could say, okay, we're going to put 30 units of affordable housing in here, but the inclination was never to develop affordable housing. The inclination was to develop a luxury building. When I was trying to find a place, I had been living on a couch for probably close to 6 months, maybe a little bit more. I spent about 2.5 years in a YMCA before that. So, housing security is something I've never experienced. And it becomes a reality where you're thinking, not only how am I going to pay my rent, but where am I going to sleep if I can't pay my rent?
So I don't know how much you're paying above a third of your income, which makes you automatically housing insecure.
Right.
But I believe just in the way that homeowners can get a mortgage interest deduction, we should have a tax credit that's targeted towards renters.
Do you think that housing, clean, safe, affordable housing is a right?
This idea in America, there should be certain fundamental things that are our rights, from healthcare to housing. Nobody should suffer homelessness. Safe, decent, affordable housing is something that everyone should have a right to in this country.
What do you think, as president, will work is the model so that we have the ability, and I say we because it's a program that I'm not ashamed that I participate in.
Which one?
A voucher program.
Section 8?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's gotten a bad rap through the years. I would like to take that stigma away. I would like to create opportunity where we have programs that are rolled out to get people from the subsidy to the homeowner, which there are these programs, but I don't feel like they're working effectively.
They're not. And think about this as a country. You can work a full-time job and still need a housing subsidy because your job doesn't pay enough. That is so unjust. So we want to shift the power back to some equity and justice in housing. This is ultimately about a wage issue in this country. People in my neighborhood who work minimum wage jobs should be above the poverty line. We should have a $15 minimum wage. And so one of the fundamental pillars of what we're trying to do in terms of economic justice for me as President of the United States is something I call the RISE credit, which is a massive expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit, which would actually raise the incomes of 150 million Americans, cut poverty by a third, and even change the definition of work. So this is how it works. When you do your taxes, you qualify, and we want to have automatic qualifications. You would get money back on your taxes. There's a lot of things we do in our tax code to give people with wealth incentives to create more wealth. I believe we should give people who are struggling tax cuts.
I'm sitting here in rural, from rural New York and thinking, well, everybody is leaving my county and they're coming to the cities. And why are they leaving my county? Well, they're leaving my county because agriculture is dying. Industry, it has left a long time ago. There are no full-time jobs. Everything's a part-time job. And as a dairy producer and someone who sees that, just knowing that we have cities because we have agriculture. I do what I do all day long so that there's food on the table. It is about housing as much as it is about rural issues.
So this is very similar to what's happening to our cities right now. Mm-hmm. The massive corporate consolidation in the ag sector, where you have where people who were in the cattle industry used to have multiple people trying to buy their goods. Now they have one person dictating the price.
Right.
The source products, when I went out and met with red state farmers, well before I was running for president, but this is why I'm a guy that puts farm bills in.
Right.
there used to be multiple people to buy your source products. Now Monsanto and others have gobbled up. You're shifting from independent family farmers to massive corporate factory farms, which are changing the practices. And frankly, this corporate consolidation is hollowing out communities like you. Small business people like you are getting squeezed and squeezed. This has got to be an election. I tell Democrats all the time, they say to me, the number one thing I want from a candidate is to beat Donald Trump. And I'm like, look, beating Donald Trump is a floor. It is not the ceiling. It gets us out of a valley, but not to the mountaintop.
Well, Phyllis, I have a question for you, because in your community, a lot of the people have conservative views.
Yes.
And you've said that you kind of understand. So where do you think that Democrats are missing the mark and that Trump kind of has their ear?
So things like gun rights, they're very, very much, they're very defensive. Somebody's going to take my guns away. I heard you say law-abiding citizen doesn't have anything to worry about. And they say, well, yeah, but the next time my inspection sticker runs out, there goes my guns. That's the way they think.
That's the way they think. I understand. And by the way, the fear-mongering is fed to them. Lies are fed to them by a corporate gun lobby that's invested in them fighting against any common sense gun safety.
And I think that because we, maybe because people are spread out, maybe because I think that difference in feeling more like an individual, feeling more like you're on your own.
What would be your advice for a Democrat running for president to try to sway some of the people in your neighborhood?
Some reassurances about maintaining their rights. People really are afraid of losing their rights.
And so let's talk about gun control. I mean, are you going to take away their guns?
Right.
No. We've got to get back to, and guns is a great issue, to just common sense. I would say 0% of law-abiding citizens, 0% who want to buy a weapon in this country can't buy one. There's
Currently,
no laws
but
to stop.
I think that it would be an important message to say the other.
But I guess my point is
to reassure people that they are not going to be blocked.
But as a guy who's now going all over this country talking to us, you want to know the reassurance that people ask for me? I have parents standing up and say they're afraid to send their kids to school now. I have kids now that are asking with fear in their eyes. If you need a license to drive a car, nobody's being prevented from driving a car who's law-abiding citizen. If you need a license to buy a car, you should need a license to own and buy a firearm. One of the great causes of the next president and the next, hopefully, era of our country is to put more sense, I always say more indivisible back into this one nation under God, to help us understand we may be different parties, different races, different religions.
See, I don't think it was ever like that. I don't think that's the big frustration I have when we talk about going back to common sense and we talk about things like, before this era before Donald Trump. The problems that we face here in Newark, New Jersey, they predate Donald Trump, they predate Barack Obama, they predate all these things. And we're talking about all the way back to that idea of housing security and subsidies. The system that we have in place here, I don't think it's broken. I think it's functioning the exact way that it was designed. But it was designed with red lines to prevent black and brown people from buying houses. Now you fast forward to 2019 and we're talking about giving people tax subsidies to rent. Well, you can rent your whole life and at the end of it, you've got nothing to give to your kids. Why aren't we helping people own their own homes?
Bijan, you don't have to tell me that there's the going back to eras. There's African American in this country. This city we are seeing Newark as it is because of, as you said, redlining, disinvestment. Nobody wanted affordable housing in New Jersey, so they stuck it all into dense pockets of poverty. I could go through the big so-called urban renewal projects that ran highways right through African American communities. This city, you're right. And so this idea of going back, no. There's never been a period in American history. I always say the gardens of our democracy have always had racism, bigotry, literally written into our rules. We could walk around my neighborhood just to talk to people about being arrested with criminal convictions for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. Because the criminal justice system, as my friend Brian Stevenson says, treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. Right. So I'm not trying to go back, but I do know when we make advancements in this country, we do it together.
You talk about inclusiveness and the dream. Right now, it's a lot of hatred.
Yes.
It's a lot of hatred. It's a lot of misunderstanding. There is no empathy. It's like, what are you going to do and to foster that? Phyllis talks about the rural versus the urban versus the suburban.
Yes.
We don't see ourselves, like, we don't see ourselves as totally one.
I would say also, just to that idea of empathy, what I keep seeing from all the candidates is how I should empathize with a white working class male in Ohio. Endlessly. Oh, you got to feel bad for this guy that lost his job, and that's why he voted for Trump. But I'm tired of hearing that. If I want to empathize with someone who's having a bad day, all I have to do is walk out my front door. Walk to downtown Newark. I was walking down here, or I was riding my bike, about a month and a half ago, going to meet a friend over on Halsey Street to talk about something. Guy was shot dead at 9:45 in the morning. All those people around there are traumatized. I didn't see nothing on the news. ABC, nothing. And every time there's a mass shooting, we're talking about these gun laws. Every time there's someone that looks different from the people in this community, it's an issue that we have to talk about.
Bijan, we live in the same community. You want to know one of the most painful days of my life was walking in this neighborhood, having a kid shot, trying to stop him from bleeding to death, and going back to my apartment and realizing that it won't even make the news.
Right.
You want to talk about your city? I called one of your state legislators right after the police officers were shot, which was national news. And they informed me, this is what he said, we talked obviously about the dangers of our officers face every day, but then he goes on to say, we've had 8 mass shootings in Philly this year. This is him saying to me, I haven't read about any of them. But my point to you is, I feel all of this, and I live it every single day. And the reason I'm running, the main reason driving me to get up every single day is because I'm tired of politicians like the one we have at the highest office in our land that's trying to exploit our fears and our differences. Every day trying to blame problems on Muslims or Mexicans or Chinese, trying to vilify people in our own country. My mission for this country is to solve the injustices that persist in neighborhoods like mine. And this president uses his platforms every single day to demean, degrade, and divide. And I will use the highest office in the land, which happens to be one of the highest moral offices in the land, every year to heal, to unify, and get back to the cause of our country, because we have real injustices.
Can I call you out on a specific, and you can correct me if I'm wrong?
Please.
You talked about you don't need to go to other communities to see the challenges that are here. It's my understanding, and again, I could be wrong, I would apologize. I've seen you in Flint, Michigan, talking about the lead crisis. Why haven't you done an event here in Newark, highlighting the lead crisis, standing at a podium and saying, this is a major issue? It's been going on for over a year now. The challenge for people like me living here is that at this point, I have no idea who to believe. It's disconcerting, because the lead is one issue, and now they're talking about these other things. So, is it true that you've done these other, events in places like Flint? And if you haven't done one here, why not?
So we've been fighting lead in Newark because first it was a lead paint issue in our city, which is a lead fight. So this is something I've been working on tirelessly before this presidential campaign even talked about. I was talking about that there are 3,000 jurisdictions in this city that have more than twice the lead levels in Flint, Michigan. This is things I've been pushing legislation as a senator to solve the problem. This is something that we don't get TV cameras out there.
But you've been to Flint. On a podium there. I mean, have you done the same thing
I have
here,
done events. I've worked with the governor here. I've worked with the mayor here. I'm out in my own neighborhood handing out bottled water and carrying cases of water, helping my neighbors, because this, again, is not a foreign issue to me. Right. This is my community, my friends, people who are family to me. This is our struggle. And so, but again, this is not just a Newark struggle. This is one of the reasons why, and I challenge the other people in this race, a fundamental pillar of my climate plan is environmental justice, because there are so many cities in this country that have the same lead service lines that Newark does. And this is an infrastructure issue.
That's what I was going to say, isn't it? Because we, when you talk about our cities, they're old. So why are we waiting until, and then when Flint happened, it was like,
that's his question. Why are we waiting?
Why are we waiting, and
as mayor?
What are, you going to do in your presidency to shift that and make it so we're getting the funding, we're getting what we need?
Right.
Because a tragedy, you talk a lot about tragedy happening and pulling us together. Like, a tragedy shouldn't have to happen to pull us together.
Exactly. And this is why, first of all, I have a climate justice pillar, and we're going to put hundreds of billions of dollars. By the way, that's going to create millions of jobs. to start to have every preschool, every school, every city to replace these lead service lines because local communities don't have the resources. This is a federal infrastructure problem and we need a president who will lead on it.
I have a quick question about healthcare because me, as a mother of 4 children, I see that that's one of the highest debts besides, I guess you would say, education that one has. You talk about working class, all one has to do is get sick or need an operation.
You're out the door. That's it.
Yep.
Yes. So, and as I'm studying to become a RN,
Oh, you
so this affects me personally and it affects me professionally.
Well, first of all, we know how broken this system is, which actually drives up expenses because people in my community are incentivized not to go to a doctor until something gets really serious because you can't afford the copay. Your insurance might not cover it.
Or they go to urgent care.
So they end up in hospital emergency room. We have a system that's fundamentally unjust, and that's why I support a Medicare for all system and driving down the costs in this system, everything from prescription drugs to so much of the other things, bureaucracy is driving up costs for the average person.
But didn't you vote against the ability of people to buy drugs from Canada?
That is absolutely
okay.
not
That's
true.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me I'm wrong, but that's what I understood.
When I was mayor, I fought to, and successfully in some parts of the city, to lower prescription drug costs. But I actually wrote the legislation to allow importations with Senator Sanders and Senator Casey from Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean, I take you at your word, but that's what I had
Yeah.
understood was that you had voted against the ability of a person to purchase their prescription meds from Canada.
Absolutely, absolutely not. We actually wrote the law that would have allowed prescriptions, and if this becomes ever the law of our land, it'll be because of legislation like mine that we
And
wrote.
your point is you're for Medicare for all, but also not eliminating the private option.
My point is that we need to get to a point of Medicare for all. I think that's the best system if we're going to design this from scratch. But I also am very realistic that know that that's something we won't be able to shift to. We need a glide path. So a lot of that is creating a public option that can compete with private insurers that will be, in my opinion, a much better option for people to move into.
Do you think healthcare is a commodity or a right? Because if it's talking about competing, it's a commodity. If we talk about it's a right, then it's a totally different paradigm.
It is a fundamental right. You can't have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a very fundamental American ideal, unless you have access to health care.
The big frustration that I have, not just from your campaign, but from campaigns in general, is we talk about the ideas of free or affordable college tuition. And we talk about these systems that are supposedly broken. And I'll say it again, I don't think any of those systems are broken. I think that they're functioning just as the way that they were intended. To graduate and get a bachelor's and then go on to medical school is a challenge that's so great and so expansive that vast majorities of the population would never even get there to try. So I have a bachelor's degree in photography. And a couple years ago I decided, well, now I'm going to go back to school and I want to become a physician because I saw some of the challenges that we had in this community and what I saw overseas. And the last hurdle to try and get into these into the medical schools was the MCAT exam. It's $315 to take the exam. I could afford the $150 prep kit. My colleague could afford the $1,500 prep kit. Who do you think did better?
Yeah.
So all that stuff, I went and applied to my local institution. It wouldn't even give me an interview. The people that are becoming physicians, they're not the people that I look at in my community. And the result is a dehumanization of the people that show up to those emergency rooms, because I work in them.
I am a college student, returning college student. I'm in a nursing program at community college. My daughter also attends the community college. So, like, after tuition, we still need money for books. We still need money for transportation, childcare. Do you believe it is a right for free education, for free college education? Do you believe that's our right?
So, again, this is the outrage, what we're doing to so many Americans by putting so much debt on them that, first of all, it's pushing a lot of people away from going to college, a dream of going to college. So my plan is very simple. If you go to college, you should have a pathway for debt-free college, not just tuition debt. You and I both know it's books, room and board, and all
everything associated with successfully finishing college.
This is why we need a Department of Education led by somebody, not Betsy DeVos, but somebody who actually knows about education, who was in public schools and understands the struggles in many ways that you're putting out. But a lot of these institutions, and this is what I don't understand why we don't demand, I will demand more accountability.
Yes.
They take tons of federal dollars.
Yes.
They're taking your taxpayer dollars on
right.
one end, and then they're creating a system that's unfair and unjust on the other end.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
if there's no accountability, I'm going to put a lot of accountability on people that are taking federal dollars and doing the kind of practices that are discriminatory or disparate in their impact against communities. It's unacceptable. Now, I believe in something very simple, and this is a radical, some people say it's a radical idea, I say it's not. I think it's a birthright in America. If you're born in this country, you should have a $1,000 savings account right away. And by the way, the social science data shows that a kid who knows that there's a savings account, their chances of going to college go up 3 times. And for every year, more money should put in that account depending on the income of your parents. So the lowest income families, those kids would become 18 years old with about $50,000 to invest in starting a business, if they want to go into to be a farmer, to buying a home, or to going to college.
So we're actually talking about equity.
We're talking about, I love that you said that word, because paychecks help you get by, but wealth, equity, having resources,
And generational.
it creates generational wealth. And so this is a basic idea.
So how will you get by the perception that this is not an incentive to be low income, so that
Because-
you can
Because
disproportionately?
being low income sucks. That's the
People
thing.
don't know that.
People,
No,
I
people
know
know
that.
that.
People know.
People
I
know
know
that.
that.
Phyllis,
That's this.
people know
yeah,
that.
that's the
Trust
biggest
me, people
misnomer.
know
Is
that.
like
That is a
want
huge,
to
I
spend
know
a week,
that.
spend a week
You know
living in the
that. You know
YMCA
that.
where I lived, and then you tell me that this is a great incentive to be low income.
This is what people perceive.
Oh, I agree.
with these
I
programs.
hear
This is what people
there is this,
perceive.
and I encounter this that people feel like, oh, they
Yes.
always say the word they,
Yes.
and often that has some racial overtones
Absolutely.
and whatever. They say they get free stuff. Government is giving them free stuff.
These are the perceptions that you're
Right.
that
And
you
they're-
are going to be
right.
fighting against.
Right, and they're preyed upon. And I've
Yes.
seen this. And I've seen politicians from Willie Horton to welfare queens, all these stereotypes that are thrown out there to try to gin people up against other Americans. But if you live around in the community I live and know the people that I know, you see that
And I
some
see
of
the
the hardest work-
hypocrisy. I understand.
And you know this,
But
that-
these are the perceptions that this party is going to be up against.
The reality is we need to start talking in a moral sense about eradicating poverty again in this country. Not through handouts, but to give everybody a fighting chance.
I think we need to expand the conversation into what is that going to mean for me?
Yes,
Because they're not going to stop saying they.
right.
They want to hear how that's
Right.
going to come back and affect them.
And if
if
I'm-
we have numbers, if we have ideas, if we have propositions on how that's going to feed back and help my rural community
Right.
keep local businesses, bring people into my community instead of having
Right.
them leave, then those are conversations
Right.
that people will turn their
And
ear
if every
to.
18-year-old, by the time a kid turns 18 in your community, had capital now as an American birthright, and remember, we give what they, in fact, in Washington they call it tax expenditures, to give wealthy people incentives to create more wealth. Our tax
Right.
system pushes nearly $700 billion every year up to the wealthiest people to help them compound their wealth. And we give major loopholes to that. It's about time that working people get the tax breaks so that they can invest in their communities. And
Rather than the illusion of trickle down.
And this gets back to the sense of what is going to be the agenda of our next president? What is going to be the sense of urgency that they feel every single day? As a guy who is rooted in a community like this, which as much as people might want to tell you it's dissimilar from a rural area, there are folks that I know personally who are struggling in your communities. This is the problem with the country, because people have that same feeling in your community as they do in your community. I'm saying to you to change things. That's why I say this election, if it's just about Donald Trump and just somehow beating him, I don't want that. People on my block don't want to go back to the glorious old days of 2015, where we still had environmental toxins, we still had unaffordable rents, and we still had challenges. For me, this has got to be a moment where we can create a mission in this country where we begin to see common cause and could build the coalitions to further advance our nation and get the big things done.
Thank you all so much for your time. Really grateful.
Thank you for having
All right.
me.
I think the best compliment you can give Vonda is if we get some to-go bags and you
Oh,
take
yes,
some crab cakes.
yes,
and-
yes. But it was excellent. Very good. Vonda, wherever she is.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
love Vonda.